I thought we just try and touch upon a few of the areas which came up in discussions, and we'll try and complete that, and maybe I'll direct those questions to who might feel is the most relevant, but feel free to. So the first discussion, which I think is critical from a training provider's perspective, is that discussion on the sustainability of grant-based models, right? So if everyone's okay, maybe can we just spend a little time on discussing how sustainable are these models which are purely grant-based, primarily driven by the government initiatives, which are money given by the government. Does it leave the students with enough power to choose and decide what they want to do, or it's completely driven by what the government decides? So if I can just request Raj, who's been one of the primary players and a big supporter of the initiative, which we agree and support, to kind of tell us a little bit about how these models can sustain and grow.
See, our experience has been that if the program is managed tightly, this addresses a very major concern of poverty alleviation. We have realized that if you identify a real BPL, now identifying the BPL itself is a big political game. We have BPL who come in very swanky mobike, and obviously you know what's going to happen. But it has been my experience, personal experience, that when you really look for a person for whom having meals both times is a luxury, he or she is the most sincere worker. He gets trained, and these are the people who stick with the companies. We have also been mandated under the government programs to track them for a period of 1 year. In one of the projects that we do in the valley, Mr. Jairam Ramesh has directed that the tracking has to happen for 3 years. So the candidate has to be effectively tracked for 3 years. What we need to do is to give a very realistic picture of what to expect when he goes to the place of employment. So long as there is not much of a gap between what you have projected and what he actually sees, the candidates are willing to stick. But what happens many a times while mobilizing, exaggerated promises and assurances are given to the candidate, like 15,000 salary and those kind of things. And when he goes there, he finds that this is completely different. So absolutely being honest as to what you can expect. And it has been our experience that when you involve the family and expect the families to counsel the candidates, these are the candidates who stick. Otherwise, they just go there, and within 4 days, either food is a problem, or students from the valley, they feel that we feel suffocated when we work in the call centers in Mohali, or घर ठीक नहीं है क्योंकि घर में खिड़कियाँ नहीं हैं. These are the reasons on which they go back. But even in the most disturbed areas of Kashmir, like Baramulla and Anantnag, we have found that the girls, and that's a surprising change, the girls are coming out of the valley and opting for jobs in Mohali, Ludhiana, and those kind of places, in cafe, coffee day, or call center kind of a thing. So the trick is be very honest and upfront about what you should expect in the companies, and mobilize the right kind of the person who is in dire need of jobs. If you look at the creamy layer of BPL, then these are the guys who give absolutely bad name to the overall training program, because they just come for fun, attend it for 2-3 days, or sometimes there is this incentive of free meal and boarding, and then they go back. That's not the clientele that we are looking at. And therefore, done in a very tight, systematic kind of a manner, we are able to train and place these candidates. Let me just give you one simple statistics. We at ILFS work at different sectors. We started with apparel sector. Now last year, the ready-made garment export of this country was around $20 billion. as compared to China, which was to about $200 billion. And we have a reasonable forecast that 1% of the Chinese ready-made garment business is going to come to India. That means we have to almost double up. Now, where are these sewing machine operators going to come from? So whenever anybody says that there is no market or industry is not looking forward to, I am simply amused. There is huge potential. Next 5 years are going to be the golden period for serious players in the industry because the industry is looking for good candidates. I mean, which company or which organization would not like to have a very serious candidate? And therefore, the whole discussion sometimes looks to me a very, very academic kind of a discussion.
A very interesting perspective from Raj. Actually, we never thought of it from perspective of honesty playing a large role in terms of what you commit. And because one of the beliefs is that in a grant-based model, when the learner doesn't have a skin to the game because he's not putting in any money per se, and Murli talked about at least a small amount of money that should come in from learners, we find that there is a huge dropout rate that typically happens. So I'm going to turn this around to another to get another perspective from a training provider. So Varun, let me just put this question back to you. So what do you think of this whole grant-based model and sustainability of that, from a VE perspective?
So mostly before this, I worked in the ITS sector, and I'll kind of try to relate to an example from there. So I at one point was heading operations, and I had a huge attrition problem on my hand. So it's not a similar problem, but I'm just trying to bring in a different context. And the attrition there really was 120% in that program. So in about 10 months, we would turn around just about everybody, and we would have new faces. So at that stage, we came up with an idea that we need to give people a retention bonus. And that's where, I'll go back to the presentation. I talked about a scaffolding. So a lot of people came to us and said, yeah, we can sponsor that for you, but that's going to continue for the rest of your life. And in about 1.5 to 2 years, you'll see people get tired of that incentive as well, and then they anyways leave. So are you trying to bypass that problem for some time? So the answer was that we need to at least hit the ground running and kind of solve that problem by giving it that external support, just like when we repair or restore a building. And that scaffolding had to be time bound, right? That's the agreement we finally reached. So we did away with that in 2 years. Our attrition came down to 60%. That's still huge, but it's half of where the problem was. So our firm belief, again, and I represent the company in saying this, that at this stage where we are initially trying to solve some of those problems on the ecosystem side, we should at least target on one of those problems, which is mobilization, by bringing in that grant. And yes, it needs to be somewhere time-based, end somewhere, so that we make it sustainable on our own over a period of time.
So what I'm hearing you say, Varun, is that this can't sustain for long. It's good to get industry started, get industry kicked off, and at some point it needs to get into a learner fee-based model. So good. So I'll just move on now to another area that
I just wanted to add, the grant-based. So I'm assuming you're talking about government funding is what we're, okay. And if you're saying sustainable, okay, then I'm also assuming that you're able to set up a healthy business with some amount of EBITDA. Okay, let's not worry about the percentages. Okay. I think, and this is very different. We do B2G, I do B2B also. Okay. B2G, which essentially runs at the district level and so on and so forth. There's no problem with bringing kids in. Kids want to come in because they know that is the only escape to freedom, really. Okay. So one vector of sustainability is to have 4 to 6 programs which addresses your issue that does he go into something which you are offering, okay, or do you have a bag of programs which you can then, so there's some amount of counseling to be done and try and put that in place. Regarding sustainability, I started the business with grant-based government funds, and which is why I think I have a question with the others is why is this because why is the question being asked on sustainable? Because it is sustainable. I don't know if Raj will agree with me. The fact of the matter is, if you're given a 10 crore order for 3 years, you spread it over 3 years, you amortize it over 3 years in your revenues, okay? And if you construct your middle line, you have targeted EBITDAs. The beauty of this is that your revenue streams are completely visible for 3 years. Tell me any business that will, and especially the B2C, what is the visibility you have on revenues month on month?
Yeah, so Sanjay, just to kind of take this perspective, and Murli, just give me a second, is that, when we say sustainable, we are also talking about government initiatives remaining in force for a longer period of time, they're not getting pulled off. So are you building an ecosystem which is completely based on something that the government is going to provide, or this, and it's not just government, it's also CSRs, right? It's also the corporate sources, anything that is paid for, which the person doesn't have a skin in because he's not said anything. Sustainability also has got to do with, and if that doesn't happen, will the industry collapse?
No,
so that's really the point of this.
I'm sure it's not unilateral. It's
sure.
going to be a number of things that will have to add in. Okay, I'm quite sure that will happen.
Murli,
Yeah.
quick.
I'll quickly add that, for the time. I think my point is, we need to clearly understand below the poverty line segment. Our problem with government funding is that it's a multi-statement famous statement. Spending your money on somebody, his money on somebody, spending somebody's money on somebody is the worst way of managing anything. The best way to turn the government model is the skill voucher scheme. Let that guy decide where he wants to go. When it becomes his money, the moment you give him a skill voucher, he's spending his personal entitlement on somebody else. Government is not deciding that. So one is should be targeted. Second, we should be skill voucher.
And it leaves the power at the hands of the learner.
Yes,
rather than
government money, my money.
So we've got a session, I think, with Praveen's team, which actually is,
Can I make one just comment? I know it's a long question. You wanted to make one
please,
comment? So I just wanted to, I think, add a little bit of flavor to this. Let's say the government example that you gave, 10 crores. You get 10 crore order for 3 years. It's good for the business that is getting it, no question about it. But let's look at the actual value to the government on this, right? If the same 10 crore was given in a model where that was actually going to provide some kind of a backstop guarantee to a bank, and the bank would use that as a 100 crore fund to actually provide trainee financing to people who would then take a small ticket loan from the bank, the trainees, and pay it back from their jobs. All of a sudden you expanded the value of that 10 crore into a much larger amplified fund, which would actually provide sustainability because the person's taking a loan, there is some accountability coming in. The money is going much further, 10 times, and the government is actually using the total same amount of corpus for a much larger result impact.
well said, Shantanu. I think it's things like this that even our belief is that it creates sustainability, because power being transferred to the learner is, I think, the critical piece in this whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to now shift to another area just for the
one question to Sanjay.
Yes.
Sanjay, you've spoken about employment guarantee being critical, right? Entire coaching business that you'll have, there is no guarantee for the learner, right? Even in terms of either marks or getting admission into the institutes. Even then you have hordes of people coming into your classroom. Like, what is different here? Both are short-term courses, and in fact here you're getting an ROI which is much larger than what you will get in IIT or IIM coaching classes.
Yeah.
So if you can just share.
Yeah, and Nimesh, and these are some of the premises that we started with. What we have discovered also, and if you let's be only completely learner focused, only put him at the center, put him and her at the center. Okay. What we have realized is graduates also, and I'm sure Shantanu and we will agree with me, graduates also, there is a layering of graduates. There are those who don't want the job but want to go and do an IIM and so on and so forth, and study and spend money, and there's they're propagated to do that. Okay. While there is another layer that says that no, all I want is a job at this moment. And if there is a training program that will skill me to get this job, and if that is assurance, very high assurance of that, then he or she will invest in that. So there were layers. We discovered that, again, someone mentioned one size doesn't fit all. Yeah. Okay, that's what is happening there. So essentially, what works in B2G and all your null hypothesis in B2G is completely different in the B2B and B2C. It's just not the same.
Like, what is the difference in acquiring customers, the cost of acquiring customers for your vocational training business and the coaching business, for example? Like, how is it different? So if like all entrepreneurs who are there in this room, if they're trying to learn something from the coaching business, what will be the difference in terms of cost of acquiring customers for both businesses, B2C?
No, my only learning is, and which I would share with everyone, is then don't look at the coaching business model and then try to pick up from there and do a cut and paste or a copy paste from there. Okay, so that's my advice. If you ask me, net, don't copy from that business. Okay, I mean, the reason why Career Launch's vocational business is up and running, okay, is that because I ran test prep for 9 years, 8 years, you know, do that to 100 cities and so on, and then completely said thank you, goodbye, and I'm going and starting this. Okay, so I think there are some fundamentals, DNA things that will work, but otherwise, essentially, I would think that they are very different.
Just to leave a thought behind.
I have from our data, what we see is that when you do pre-assessment, in a coaching there is no pre-assessment. By and large, you want to pay, you can do. Our ratio is 1:3. For every 3 guys willing to pay, we pre-select only one because job is guaranteed. So sourcing cost triples straight away. That's a real, my first level top of
Very
my
valid, actually, very interesting.
Yeah. Pre-assessment, 1:3.
And also to get that 3, perhaps you have to contact 30.
No, that ratio I'm still
So
living
that
at.
is
Drive the mail. On the walk-in.
cost of acquisition when you're talking about, it actually becomes what
Yeah, 1:3 is our experience.
And Nimish, it's also got to do, I think, a little bit with the aspirational quotient. If I come back, you know, if you look at test prep, you know, it actually, you know, people get in there because there's a desire to get into an IM and, you know, desire to get into a management institute versus this being a very, very different segment. You know, the aspirational quotient suffers, right?
They're the student, Nimesh, they're the learner, the potential student, and therefore the learner. Okay, as a potential customer.
Potential learner.
Okay, has clarity कि क्या करने का है उसको. While the other one wants a job, so and I think the acquisition model and the acquisition route to acquiring and all is also completely different. I mean, it's chalk and cheese, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the key difference, I have one more, is basically the social acceptability factor in these two particular areas. In one of the cases where there is survival, which is actually driven, when you're talking about the B2G model, at the other end, it is actually the parents who are driving those kids to do those courses because they want that aspirational model or they want that social. So one of the key differentiators in this entire model, which actually need to map, which very nicely has been covered by Sanjay Bayal, is the ability to actually direct funds towards making the lower end activities that the socially acceptable. Means that parents should be actually proud that the child is doing those, is actually looking forward to a career in that entire story, which is willing to skip. Now, that's the main difference between the tuition model that we're talking about, in which we are going for IITs and the rest of the competitive exams, as compared to the place where we are getting people from remote areas and who are actually training themselves to survive, to get the money into the
So that's a subject of giving vocational education some kind of legitimacy. So, you know, somebody talked about advertising and campaigns being done so that, you know, people associate with that area. Okay, now we need to kind of, you know, sorry.
Yeah, I have a small thing to add. I think this entire concept of sustainability and financing, we are examining from an industry perspective. But when governments get involved in this business in many ways, the people's perspective that is more central in the decision making. And see, we cannot ignore certain facts. See, even today in this country, especially in our Pradesh, we are 30% of the people still illiterate. And then the agriculture is becoming more and more unregulated. Even in the most interior scheduled areas, tribal areas, there are not enough opportunities for people. So I'm glad Mr. Dr.Reddy mentioned it very clearly. See, the choice is, you know, between you take 2 arms or you explore new livelihood opportunities. So given this, you know, who are the providers for such a segment of population? I'm sure no private industry will come and fund them. There are very few CSR initiatives. So the relevance of government funding in such a situation is, given the change scenario, the way the economy is transiting, is very much in existence. Then we can talk about banks getting involved in a big way, you know, so that the students can be funded or so on and so forth. But the reality today is, see, the total financial inclusion is still a very big issue. Which bank is willing to go to a tribal area or an interior rural area to open an account and then to fund them? They simply conclude that they do not have the capability. So these are all the various parameters we have to take into consideration before we say that, you know, whether this is the right model or not.
Sure, ma'am. Actually, I don't think there is a position
what
to take on whether
about,
it's sustainable or not.
what
Absolutely right.
what
I think there is no doubt of the fact that
government
government
has to
intervention
pay.
is required. We're only wondering how long does it remain? How long does it sustain? Will the industry purely depend on only, so it has to be a mix and match of models that need to work, which is really what is coming out from this. Okay, so I'm going to, quick move back. I'm going to move into now. Can we just park? Sorry, it's a question?
It's a very small comment on what you said. See, it's also, we are not questioning whether government has a place to play or not. I think the methodology is also being questioned. For example, somebody said that it's not, you shouldn't fund the trainers. You should fund the poor directly by vouchers. And let them choose, and let them from beneficiaries become customers. And therefore demand services of quality. I think we're not questioning whether government should provide or not. It should provide, but methodology is being questioned.
Yes, absolutely right. Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to move to a new area. I think we've got views, and there are some answers. And I'm going to move into this area where essentially Shantanu and Murli operate in, which is something different. They've chosen to be in that space and not treat some of the discussions that have just happened, or not look at that space. Is the whole graduate space, right? So which is so the Murli, Shantanu, maybe it starts with Murli as to what are the drivers there in terms of scale, in terms of profitability, how easy is student acquisition, in areas like that. What are the typical challenges, is what you face in that space, because it's not the same as the lower end models that we talk about.
See, our experience with graduate, we must have met probably in the last 6 months 10,000 people. Sourcing is by far the biggest cost. The training cost, the training management. We find only two major costs in our business. First is sourcing, second is content development. We believe the training has to be very close to his hometown. We cannot make him travel long distances. And therefore, the availability of trainer on the date on which you want to train is the biggest challenge. You can't have a permanent trainer available. So we use a lot of freelance trainers. So the only way we break that problem is to have classroom content which is driven by technology. So the trainer becomes more a facilitator. So the investment on the content is very high. For us, a single course will cost somewhere around 20-25 lakhs to generate the content for a 12-day program. But the trainer thereafter has to really follow. Even though he's from the industry, he's got some experience, he doesn't have the stress of managing the response. But in terms of coming back to acquisition, I think the biggest challenge, I think somebody mentioned, we did a survey of 6,000 graduates in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. And we found that 30 to 40% are interested in higher education, which is really what we talked about, the aspirational segment. The remaining 30 to 44% are very keen on a job right now, but they're willing to go for higher education later. They want to earn money now, get some saving and go there. And the bottom 30% has no choice but to look for a job. So when you look at our priority, we are looking at the middle 30% segment because in our belief, they are employable after some training. The bottom 30% is still a challenge because for the training period I give, I can't make them employable with a guaranteed job in mind. So again, as everybody is agreeing with us, is that we are evolving this model. First is to stay alive. I think that's the biggest challenge. I wish I was an NIT or ILFS with that kind of big pockets, but we are all having very small pockets. So our first priority is to stay alive. To stay alive means you must have revenues. You can make a loss for 1 or 2 years, but you can't run a business model based on losses. The governmental funding is very attractive, but it comes with so many conditions. I think we'll go mad managing government only. We'll not be managing either the customer or the training. I'll be going to their office regularly to collect my money. And many of us are averse to paying money to get the money back. I think it's a very, very complicated system. So effectively, in my mind, graduate space, we are looking at the second 30 segment. It's a big surprise to me. And I'm saying when you do a lot of effort, people are paying money. Right? In one case, we discovered a fraud where an individual has paid money to some third party to get into a course on which he has to pay 7,000 rupees. He paid 20,000 rupees to intermediary, which is shocking because the job was unattractive, the sales job. So I believe it is possible to make them pay, but the cut-off point is around 5,000 to 7,000 rupees. You should not go beyond that level. Our study also revealed that the price barrier of 5 to 7,000 and balance has to come from the employer or from the government dole, whatever we are doing. So it is possible to source. It is possible to get them interested in the course. The transformation which you see in some of them, they all come from smaller towns. The first customer we did, 78 locations we sourced for 120 people. That means each location there was only one guy to be hired. And they have to go back to their posting. So the sourcing effort is enormous. But the training effort is not so complicated as my mind. And the transformation, which in 12, 13 days, we took videos, which is really amazing. The transformation is outstanding.
Shantanu, just to, if I may just take the question. But Murli, if I just you have NSDC funding, so you have deep pockets today, both of you, right? So you've raised money, you've got the money. Now, having got the money, which will of course take care of infrastructure, take care of your running the business. Do you think it's a classic case of a B2C model working in the graduate space?
Well, I can't talk about a classic case because I've not really done a whole lot of B2C before this. But from what I can tell, there are some interesting factors that we are seeing. I think the point that Murli made is true, which is it's a middle game, right? You're playing in the middle of the pyramid in terms of the talent pool. Because the top 20% doesn't need you. The bottom 40% you can't really help a whole lot. And we're talking about short programs because unless the program is short and sweet and highly outcome oriented, there is not a whole lot of takers. So timing is important. I think the B2C cycle plays a role. In fact, the other thing to notice is that this demand side also is the middle of the pyramid. The best companies have entered into, alliances of matrimony with top colleges, right? So they are hiring in large numbers in regular basis, but the middle companies don't get a chance to hire, so they become natural partners for this kind of a model that we have. So what we're trying to do is say middle to middle, take middle of the pyramid talent, do the transformation, and then work with placement on middle and small companies, which actually have good innovation work, good R&D work, and therefore they can provide a better quality of results. So that's one thing we found. But one thing, having said that, the interesting B2C model which I see is that this is a very sensitive cycle to the current mood of the market. If recruiting tends to be slow, then there's a lot of backlash that happens very quickly because you start to build inventory of people very fast in this business because just the short cycle creates more inventory. And that's, sure, education institutions face that problem on an annual basis, but we face that on a quarterly basis. So that's an interesting problem we have to solve. And there are solutions to that we also find. So overall, I think I would say that it is a model which works and it's working quite well. We have also found another metric, which is that if a salary for the job that is out there that the person gets as an outcome is X, then you can probably charge between 2 and 3X as the multiple, as the course fee. And that is sustainable. So we don't see a problem. With a maintainable level of placement with a set of partners, well-defined courses taught by industry trainers, this 2X multiple, 3X multiple is easy to sustain. The only last point I'll make is that this whole trainer business itself is tough, and that is why we have taken the view that it's going to be about scale. It's going to be about platforms that can allow us to take 1 or 2 trainers to a much longer distance, much larger reach. And without that, the profitability will not really be sustainable.
Which you can do very easily at the graduate space because people are a lot more easier, amenable to technology at that stage, right? So
I think I want to make a very important point here. The BTC spoils the employer. Please understand, that is what we have been doing. We had one customer, when I negotiated 80% payment, and some other trainer goes and says, we will get paid in B2C model. He has no outcome responsibility. I think this is what I said. The co-commitment is not there. He is not interested in the course content. He is not interested in my pre-assessment. He has no game to play. And then we had a case. I think we worked with one of the insurance companies. 1 lakh was the course fee. People left in 6 months' time. And there are more court cases will arise out of this because the guy is paid 1 lakh thinking the employer will take care of him. Employer sacks him for whatever reasons, because downsizing, upsizing, whatever you want to call it. Who is accountable? So I think I am in favor of moving towards B2C over a period of time. You must make both the guys pay money now and slowly push the bar, because as the feedback comes and the course is well done, students are more interested, so change the ratio towards more and more the students. Otherwise, if you do it from day one, I think we are spoiling the employer, and one day employer will have no stake and he will not stay in the job. If he doesn't stay in the job, this whole exercise is wasted.
Wow, so that's another perspective saying, we're talking about how to get the learner engaged and how to get the learner skill. Here is how do you get the employer skill into the, into the whole game, and that's a great view. Yeah, can we have it quickly? I just have a third question to ask the panel, and then we'll actually
go ahead, Al.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kunal. I have a question for Shantanu or Murli. I run a startup focused on skill development. So you mentioned about using technology for delivering the training, and that also solves partly your faculty shortage issue. But then when you have a B2C model where you are expecting enrollments to happen, doesn't your delivery again hit the same bottleneck as if your enrollments are not going high, the technology is not really reaching out, right? So how do you ensure that? I mean, you're not really solving a penetration or reach problem by using technology, right? That is still limited by your enrollment challenge?
Technology does not solve the enrollment problem, that's it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I think the issue is what we are saying is technology solves the trainer problem, not the enrollment problem. Second thing is you can guarantee some consistent delivery on all the batches. Only technology can guarantee. Which means even though the trainer is there, if the trainer has a lot of flexibility in what he wants to do in the course, you can't guarantee the outcome which you want. So having said that, I believe in our technology mode, it's still a classroom mode. We are not still a remote mode. But in the classroom, we believe technology can be used and later on move towards the model which is talking about, where we do a batch of smaller batch sizes can be managed by a technology-driven system.
So I agree with Murli completely on his comments. One thing about enrollment that you mentioned, I want to just throw some color on that. So our view of this is that you have to build relationships with colleges and tier 2, tier 3 town small entrepreneurs who can set up infrastructure and do sourcing on a continuous basis. So the enrollment problem is actually solved by decentralizing the sourcing problem, right? You centralize the training problem, but you decentralize the sourcing problem by creating small pockets of classrooms in various colleges, whatsoever, right? So that's a model we believe we are going to follow, because we agree with completely that if you centralize all sourcing into a single location, I think it's almost impossible to solve the problem, right? So that's what we do. Yeah.
So I would have loved to move this question to Varun, but Varun, we don't have time. Purple Leap is a great model that you guys also follow in the same space. But I'm sorry, we need to really move on.
Just when you say 2 to 3 years, annual wage or monthly?
I had a follow-up to Shantanu also. I'm Deepak Basu. We've been completely focused on jobs as the outcome. Where we work, we found that, and we've had it accepted by people who fund us, the concept of entrepreneurship as also placement. And for especially in traditional societies where people are, especially women, are unable to move, or people who actually want to start a business, it's perfectly legitimate to take them through a training program and help them to set up an industry. And that has alleviated some of our pressures on the whole system.
Thanks.
That's also a good area for government funding.
And the
what
skills
are
actually doing? I'm just curious. We're doing vocational skills like cell phone repair, desktop publishing.
For individual.
Yeah, cyber cafe.
Self-employed.
Exactly. Kind of. And group employed.
Okay. So here's the last area which I'm an area that I like a lot in terms of talking about, which is, and I'm going to address it to Sanjay Bell. Really NIT coming from the background of being a very, very strong B2C player. I'm not going to say how will B2C work, that's not my question. But we've got B2C, B2G, B2B, right? We've got 3 models that we talked about. Do you really see one model working, or is it a hybrid, of multiple models? So is there a grant-based model that can run in B2B? For example, can there be a grant from the government, but your business is all about B2B? And similarly, other hybrid models that you see across these three areas. Sanjay?
Well, as I said that, as far as government thing is concerned, or the grant or what you're talking about, I think we need to actually sub-segment also the marketplace. Typically we do in our B2C model, and identify, I saw somewhere, I think Murli or somebody, which is level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, which was more in terms of their education qualification. I would say sub-segment as per the needs, like, something that Raj was talking about, something Ma'am was talking about, and then only use, when I say synergize, that is what means that if we sub-segment our target audience of these 500 million people, we'll find there'll be at least 6-7 sub-segment, which will be in terms of, perhaps more in terms of affordability. And if we utilize these models, both B2G, B2B, and B2C accordingly, perhaps that will be the right hybrid model, rather than trying to apply everything to everything, like he was talking about a classic thing of a BPL and coming into a swanky mobiles. So as long as we can identify that, then I'm sure it will work. But it has to be a hybrid model and addressing different needs of different consumer segments.
I really agree, because one of the, you can't compartmentalize yourself and say it's just B2C, it's B2B. So there is a method to actually work, create hybrid models across, and so all models remain, in existence. The government funding continues to be very, very relevant, but if you can move that into running successful B2B opportunities, then there's a great way of leveraging that. Okay, so let me just throw the discussion open to the to our audience, and if we can have last three questions quickly, which just from the audience. So please let us know whom you want this question to be addressed by.
No, it's a question which Mr. Dravid raised of sourcing. Now we operate in that typical segment, which is welding, where the company is not willing to pay and the cost of training is high. And typically, I would blame the IT sector because we're not able to source. So, and I went to the exact place where you mentioned about Fulwani, and coming from a 4G background, I wanted to kickstart the project on 23rd of Jan. So, I had to sit there in the pouring rain under a thatched hut in a government school, and we got 8 students. My question is, can the government through maybe the 18th Ministry of Panchayati Raj or something, help in sourcing for these boys?
Essentially, the question seems to be, can the government help in student sourcing or student acquisition?
And just to add one more point, I happened to be in another seminar called the Sojong, which is the seminar for joining of metals in BHL Trichy. And there's some obscene figure like 7 million tons of steel to be worked on, 350,000 weld metal to be poured. There's a tremendous demand. And so then why can't the government help in sourcing?
See, actually we use extensively the government machinery, and the government, for example, we go through the DRDA, the village panchayat. I mean, these are the people who know, who have the ready-made database of the candidates and are willing to part with that. I mean, there is nothing confidential about that. Incidentally, Mr. Pradeep Jana, who is one of the senior IAS officers, told me that the rate for Nakshal, I mean to join their group, was 1,500 rupees plus one country gun. So he happened to meet one of our candidates who is now working in Kerala from Fulbani, and he just wanted to tease the father, saying that you have 2 sons who are doing nothing, so why don't you ask them to join the movement? They will get 3,000 rupees and they will get. So he actually got furious and he said, what will happen then? They will get 3,000. After 3 months their bodies will be in the culvert. I would rather like them to follow my daughter, who has now so far saved and sent 25,000 rupees. So we are actually talking about a completely different set of challenges, and these boys and girls are actually willing to, in Hyderabad we have, I think, or in Chennai for example, you go to any hotel and look at the housekeeping boys, they are all from Orissa. Must be the same case here. So there is this huge segment which actually we need to bring to the mainstream, for which our experience has been that we have never found any government agency in any state wanting. On the contrary, things have changed so dramatically that every second day they chase us. Up data nahi hai, you need to send the accurate data and then review meetings. So there has been a sea change in their approach.
So last view from
I want to just answer this question of the government. 2 points I want to say. One is the government is reluctant to get involved where the student has to pay some money. You go around across all the government, as long as the government grant is there or it is free, they are very actively working on the job fairs where people can get a job as is there. So training is one minus, student has to pay money is one minus. This is one problem. The second problem is, even though the governments are very proactive, all the governments we have met, everybody is very keen, but we still have to find a mechanism. And I was suggesting one idea for all of us to think about. In the skill development, the day after the police recruitment and the military recruitment takes place, if you do an event after that day, all the rejects of this, the rejection ratio is probably 1:10. They are all going to come back for the results, and we can work with the government, do the next day at the skill social. All of us can get together. 1 lakh people come into any of the fairs. Very interesting. And they're all 7th class, 10th class pass variety. So only thing is, when they get failed, they're more open to listen to your idea. If you go to them before, they will not listen to you. So it should be the day after the event is over. Then I think we've been talking to military, and the military is also very keen. I mean, Indian Army is very keen, because they're also having a lot of riots in the streets because people don't get jobs, they don't know what to do with them. So we need to work some model like this.
See, just one last point, since sourcing seems to be definitely a common problem for all of us, and taking it from Murli, what you're saying, rejects of police in this, we tried an experiment and we tied up with McDonald's, and exactly the same way it works. We also thought about it, we said all the candidates that are coming to you, the way you're rejecting them, and they passed on the data. And so there's enough assessment, and those are the ready prospects. They're ready to work with you because you already tied up with McDonald's, and then that is how it.
And there are enough assessment tools available, Murli is aware, to create this concept of trainable rejects in terms of certain rating and all that. Okay, so we need to end this session. I'm sorry, we are completely out of time, and I thank all the panelists for some wonderful views. Thank you very much.